Hey everyone, welcome to Beat Around the Blockchain. I appreciate all of you who continue to come back episode after episode, week over week. Your support means the world to me, and it's a big part of how we're able to keep this stuff going. This week, especially exciting. Some of you know I'm a huge fan of the VR, AR, metaverse conversations. I don't work in it specifically, but it's definitely a passion and hobby of mine to dive into conversation. And this week we've got special guests, Rob McCarthy and Tim Prochak, who are here with Illust, and we're going to dive into a little bit about what they do. But at a high level, it's an interactive map company powered by the blockchain and augmented reality. Rob, Tim, how are you guys?
Pretty good.
Yeah, holding in there, holding in there. I mean, we're running up to East Denver, closely followed by South by Southwest, closely followed by lots of stuff. And we've got launches in dev, so kind of hectic, but that's kind of normal.
Yeah, we're here at Art Blocks. We are running into the same thing, especially on the biz dev side. For marketing, it's hey, where does it make sense to do full-fledged activations because it gets really expensive? But for us, it's like it's not very expensive to just send one of us or two of us at these places that makes sense for us to have a presence at. But man, does it
take
up
out
a lot
of
time?
being charming.
Yeah,
Cool.
I mean, which it's so funny because I love going to conferences. I literally beg them to send me to as many as possible. They make comments about just unleashing me at these conferences because I just love meeting people.
Yeah.
But all these places want to pack it into a handful of weeks. Pretty much from April until end of May, I am gone in one state or country or another.
Yeah, hectic. And there must be a way outside of Crunch to build things, but we've yet to find it. We'll get
there. we'll get it organized. Cool. Well, let's dive into it, guys. The most boring way to start things is by asking like who you are, what you do, all of that good stuff. But something right from the get-go that I love is the story of how you two met. And it wasn't quite love at first sight, but it's definitely entertaining nonetheless. So would love to start at what you both were doing prior to meeting, because I think it's relevant to what led you guys to having that initial conversation, and that'll transition us nicely into Illust and what we're doing now.
100%. Yeah, I'll kick it off. My name is Rob. So I came into immersive technology and right when DK2 came out for the Oculus headset, and then I got Samsung Gear, 360 camera, started filming shows and then doing like little music videos and whatnot, and many iterations and projects and partners along the way. Got brought into the fold to launch at South by Southwest in 2019 the Spark AR creative tools for 3D motion designers and those in the augmented reality field. And working with Facebook on that activation, got to work with some really compelling artists, some really cool peeps. And after the project, home in Venice Beach, was actually able to, through serendipity, one of my friend's neighbors during 4th of July was just coming back home, which was Tim. And so he was talking bullocks off the roof to Tim. Tim was responding in his quite British way. And my buddy turned to us in like, I kind of feel bad. Should we invite him up? And we're like, yeah, absolutely. And after talking with Tim, we had a lot of mutual friends. We're totally plugged into the space. So yeah, Tim, I'll share your point up to that.
I mean, you can tell by my haggard face that I'm old. And so I've been in, I always say 6 years, but it's actually more like 20, of various iterations of agency land or tech land or startup land, working on mostly things that move, mostly things that are interactive. So everything from like visuals for Paul McCartney to museum installs to experiential activations to, basically the idea was to keep in front of the tech because then I didn't have to be that good at it. But at the time, I was consulting for Sony Mobile in Sweden and Snap. And so Snap brought me out to LA, and I'd always sort of found LA a little bit too spread out and a little bit weird and soulless compared to an old European city. But for some reason, when I was there, I fell in love with it and then just stayed. And it was just sort of me on my own, working our way into the AR scene, working with Snap. And as Rob said, after a sort of exchange of, let's say, salty words across the balcony, I ended up going up and seeing them. And then I was like, oh, it's LA. Nothing's going to happen because we found out we had similar things. But then yeah, as
Sure.
Rob said, I paddled out surfing on my own, and suddenly I saw him paddling towards me, and that's where the germ of the ideas came from.
Yeah, it was pretty mental. I paddled out because I was having one of the worst days of my life, and Tim was like, "Hey, what's up, man?" And we were just kind of shooting the shit out there, and some of the ideas, like the formative ideas for the business, came to light. And I think there was one moment where Tim was like, "What if we were able to take these augmented reality graphics and put it on the blockchain?" And it just stuck. And I was like, no concept of NFT. This is 2019. Granted, NFTs are going strong. Super rare is still a thing. But I was more in the immersive tech space. Part of me was like, man, I'm gonna really have to learn a whole nother sphere of doing things, which is bringing me into the blockchain world. But it just really clicked and really made sense. And so out in the water, we kind of like, yeah, let's do it. Let's figure this
Yeah.
out.
Tim,
Let's make this
Tim, what
happen.
brought that thought to your mind about like what if we could
Well,
do this on the
honestly,
blockchain? Like, why did you feel that was missing?
I'd been dwelling on it for a long time, actually, probably for a good 6 years prior to that. And one, because things like show visuals and actually a lot of the TV I worked on was ephemeral compared to something you're putting in a museum that's an interactive experience. And then I'd seen like the best minds of my design generation and coding generation destroyed by making yet another advert for Doritos or something. And it's like, there are not that there's not more things than Doritos, but there is a certain level where you're like, okay, this is good. But also we were just cusping in what was going to be the big wave of persistence, which is the digital outdoor layer that's crashing all around us. And thanks to a few missteps by Zuckerberg, I think it's been delayed a bit. But that is still happening, especially now we have the ML models to start modeling the outside, and like LiDAR and what's called NERF is becoming pretty standardized. We're soon going to have this competition for our minds, which we've had with the internet, and we definitely lost that. I mean, we are definitely. I feel we are somehow shallower, somehow more paranoid, and somehow more lonely, despite the connectivity of this technology. And so, I think it's deeply important to predicate that with ownership and with provenance and with all the good things that the ledger brings, plus all the good things that smart contracts bring. So, yeah, it's been sort of because I've been dipping in and out of the, I guess, crypto scene, blockchain scene. Again, for a long time. Everything I said is like 6 years ago, but actually it could be longer, it could be shorter.
Sure. Rob, for you, what about like ownership on when it came to interactive experiences or digital pieces? 'Cause it sounds like this was a place when you were still either very early in your knowledge around blockchain and this whole what we now refer to as Web3 space,
Yeah,
versus just what we knew of AR, whether it was with Snap or Pokemon Go or different ways that we've seen it be activated. What really clicked with you when it came to that conversation?
totally. Totally. Well, it was approaching a familiar thing with a completely different perspective. And so I think that was the thing that really drew me in was what if we actually owned this? What if we actually weren't just players within their game, but we actually owned the game and we were able to publish into the game, and we are the ones that could have the agency and have, as Tim mentioned, the provenance. That flipping of the script was really interesting, especially having come from the Facebook ecosystem, where Facebook is the one that essentially is owning outright all the content on the platform. And but that's just how things were always being done. And the idea that maybe there's a technology that can actually flip the script, I thought that was just so empowering and that was so attractive, where it just made a lot of sense that we actually could be able to reshape the narrative through technology to be able to have the power to do what we see with our creations. And I think that was what really compelled me. And it was also kind of interesting because we were doing, at least up until that point, I had a lot of brand relationships and a lot of like record label relationships, management relationships, do graphics, and we would pump it out, and it would just absolutely crush and get all these millions of views, and then but after that there was no life beyond that. It was just done for that moment, even though it was really compelling content, but no one had ownership. Facebook had ownership, and in their terms of service at the time too, last time I checked, at least, it was that when you uploaded to Spark AR, you were signing away all of the privileges and all of the rights of the content to the platform. So that was another thing that was like, yeah, this is probably the space to be in.
And it's sort of a hark back because alongside ownership, you start to get agency. So like things, as Rob was saying, you get millions upon millions of hits, but it's just novelty. It's like the waves crashing over you. But when you have the level of ownership, even if it's just philosophical, that changes the way you interact with stuff, and that changes the way, and that should be a sort of insurance policy against the strange jingoistic craziness that is sparking up in the internet, if you know what I mean. Because it's like it's the narrative coming at you rather than you partaking in the narrative, which is, I think, key to any sort of like healthy consciousness.
Yeah, 100%. And something about ownership, I think, isn't talked about enough is the emotion that comes along with ownership from the end user. That's a reason that for me, that what dove me into Web3 was NFTs. I had, to Tim, your point, like kind of dabbled in and out of crypto for a few years. I never really spent a ton of time in it. Conceptually, it like kind of made sense, but I wasn't super interested. I'm not a big finance person, but the idea of like digital ownership of an asset just made sense.
Yeah.
And I understood why it would matter and scale, because I understand human behavior to a pretty good extent. And when humans have an emotion tied to something, they're a lot more compelled to do it. And especially with the upcoming generation that's growing up with iPads and all of these digital things, Fortnite, right? Like they're buying these things digitally and it means a lot to them. But now you can add a whole other layer with the blockchain, and we have a long way to go in that. That's a whole other conversation for later. But I see the potential in it. It sounds like you guys do too. I'm really excited to dive into, okay, you've got this idea of ownership of these digital experiences. You have experience in AR. How did that like initial conversation form into the first iteration of what you started doing with Illust?
Yeah. Sure, Tim will fill in the gaps, but yeah, basically, so we reapproached the artists that we were working with once we built out the smart contracts, and we were able to offer them the opportunity to own the graphics we're producing, and essentially put them on chain, and then have the legacy of the secondary market royalties, which is now becoming a conversation again. But yeah, that's another can of worms. But essentially, yeah, we put in the, so we had kind of discussed with different artists, but the main artist that came to mind and really was rallying behind it was MF Doom. And it turned out that had even more gravity than we expected, seeing that the day after the auction, he passed away.
Which I'm going to reassure people was not because of the auction.
Yeah. And we had no idea until about January when it was released from the family. But essentially, the secondary market royalties being a legacy tied in to his estate. And so we didn't realize it, but the chain basically was able to eternalize his image, his likeness, his ethos, and really kind of kickstarted a lot of things for Illust as you would see it today, as we had a whole collector base who are now aware that there's a digital asset that they can have that can interact with their face or can interact with the world outside, creating a new interest in what else can we do outside with, say, this like potential metaverse that's forming in our neighborhoods.
Yeah, so it was I believe it was the first official collaborative, well, certainly the official AR NFT using technology to leverage that. And as Rob said, there were sort of these thematic sculptures based on his iconic mask. And just like Doom, it's fun to experiment with stuff. So we were doing wearables and we were throwing out there and stuff. And we were like, well, because people have a reaction. Going back to sort of ownership and other stuff, I think space is very important for the way we interact with the world. It's like I can happily read like streams on Hacker News all day long and forget what I read. But for some reason, the act of me turning a page helps a little bit, and I instill more. Mm-hmm. And like in the olden days, depending on how far you get, like the idea of mnemonic palaces and labyrinths and journeys to remember things. Like that's why a lot of like the oral tradition was, because it was about a journey going through things, and space is kind of our friend. So that's sort of a logical extension. But we were like, so, right, NFTs, good. They immortalize somehow on chain. Now we have to deal with space. And so that's like, geography. And then we had to emulate some old systems like maps and coordinates and things like that. I think now we're going into time, which will be a fun one. But
Yeah, and then one of the things that I've heard you say is the best metaverse, as we like refer to it today, is the one that's in like our actual backyard, our physical world,
absolutely.
right? And there's a lot of, I don't want to say controversy, but like definitely conversation around what is the metaverse? Is it what Mark Zuckerberg is building in his Oculus, right? And then we get into a whole can of worms with centralized, decentralized, who controls it, is real ownership, right? But then you've got Sandbox, you've got all of these different platforms that we're calling the metaverse, but that's a very general statement in my opinion. And now you're talking about something that I haven't heard, which is referring to the metaverse as what I walk out my front door and see, right? And like as the first layer.
Yes.
So tell me a little bit about that. Help me understand, as somebody who is like hearing all of these different terms, how you like to think about the metaverse, and that will help transition us into like augmented reality in this digital space.
So I dangerously philosophically think of the metaverse first and foremost as like literally it's the meta layer of understanding and your proprioception and all that. And that I think we've probably been living in various metaverses since the first really engaging novel, or since we have decent computer games or whatever. But I think we've got to stop naming things after dystopian ideas from science fiction books to begin with, because there is a tendency in this to go like, I read that book, it was great, let's make the thing that made it terrible, and then call it it. So like in that sense, it's the snow crash idea of an escape from what is terrible, but it's an emulation of this. So it seems weird to build a sort of lesser version of what is the most vivid, crazy experience that we're in, when we can actually leverage that and be part of that. And then we can hopefully get deeper into that, understand more, learn more, comes with all the advantages of a really well-established, like 80 million-year-old UI system. It's, yeah.
Yeah. On top of that, I think there's some characteristics of a metaverse that are what technology is able to provide. And I think that's where the experience outside, there can be the tangible, the I guess the non-digital experience. And then there's also this layer that can be added, this digital layer. And then the thing that's exciting about that is that there's things like immersion factors and perspective taking and transactional flows and like gamification and rewards, and like some of these concepts that we've seen baked out in different iterations of different, say, metaverses, be it games, be it social applications. All of those different dynamics that make some of those applications so powerful can then be extended to like local businesses, and they can be extended to folks, musicians who are on tour, or they can be extended in different ways. So I kind of see this, the idea of the metaverse outside is like really bringing in some of these key tools that make these digital experiences so compelling into the physical world.
Yeah, I guess there's an argument that you could make that all art, all expression, on some level is like someone saying something and want to be heard, and to be heard, you need to be understood or seen or whatever that is. And the beauty of this technology is leading us more and more to what could be a proper empathy engine, as they used to call VR, where like you could walk in someone else's shoes, you could borrow a token that lets you into a certain thing, and the world would literally change. And with that should come more connectedness, more empathy, or maybe schizophrenia. Not sure. One of the lots. like it'll either dislocate us, or it will make us much more, present to everybody in maybe a nebulous way. So yeah, that idea of these technologies, be they from the paintbrush onwards or the writing series, have all been ways to, one, externalize, but then two, communicate, to show someone else what's going on. And the best way to do that is surely to walk in someone else's shoes. And that's why the metaverse outside in AR or extended reality is interesting, because it literally can change the world that you're in.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
You could be somebody who experienced every aspect of the world and get to relive that, but in an even more interesting, different, fun, dynamic way.
Yep.
I think that can add a whole new level of excitement to just the human experience.
Absolutely. And that's without mentioning all the like utility and the other bits that come along with it. But yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's without getting too too much into some of the semantics of the Illust platform, I think there's this concept that we came up with, or I've been influenced by, in through the industry, which is kind of the idea of a reality channel, where you can be able to take these different perspectives, almost like a radio channel, and kind of switch into different views. So if you want to be seeing the world through, I'm a Lakers fan in LA, so maybe I want to see the world through LeBron or LA Lakers, then I might be able to switch into that channel. Or if I want to see the world through my friends, or maybe it's in through like beach cleanups, through the Surfrider Foundation, or whatever it is, I might be able to tune into these different realities that I'm kind of a visitor in, and be able to engage in those worlds. So I see that being really important for the long term, as we don't necessarily need to get into the wearables conversation about AR glasses at this point. But I mean, things are really well organized when we have channels, and then you can share access to the channels. You could be able to do a lot of the things that you see with contemporary social platforms when it comes to channels and content, that everyone is entitled to their own version of the world that they can create and share with their friends.
100%. So let's talk about that. So you do this project with MF Doom. It's essentially an NFT, but it's also an AR experience, right? I imagine you got a lot of feedback and data from that informed your next decision on what is next after that. So tell me a little bit about what that feedback was like, and how it led you to what now your Illust is turning into.
Sure. Tim, do you want to share about ghosting?
I mean, we'll get to ghosting. I think the initial feedback was, wow, collectors are actually quite friendly, and also, wow, it was stuff broke, as things do when you're developing things. But instead of people literally crucifying us, we had feedback, and I was like, oh, well, this is a good crowd of people. This is okay, and so that encourages. But one of their main bits of feedback was, I want to be able to place it in the world and other people to see it. So that's putting it on the map. And so I was like, that's cool. And then I was like, but there's a barrier to entry with all these AR things, because you either need to learn a 3D program or have access to other bits, or all of these. I mean, yeah, the democratization of things may or may not be a good thing, but we'll see about that later. But I was like, okay, so we need to build a whole suite of tools that people can do that is low barrier entry. Those need to be then mintable, placed in the world, all that sort of stuff. But then I was like, we can't build it in an app, though, because that's counter to all the things that we were just saying about ownership and all the other stuff. So we then set off on a much longer journey that we're still not in, to build a set of web-enabled tools that could reach the other 3 billion, but also do all this other stuff and build the contracts around it. And as we were doing that in the background, it was sort of the idea you can still show people something in AR and they go, ooh, because it tricks us into thinking there's something in the world. And that sort of physicality is really important. So that's where ghosting came in. And Rob, you go for it.
Sure. So ghosting was a 5-city tour where we were working with local artists from each city to be able to share, and kind of like an art walk fashion, works from their local neighborhoods. And so we took this and we basically started in Berlin, and then each city that we went to, we kind of added artists from those different local areas, and then they kind of came along for the ride. And so we started in Berlin, then we went up to London, and we worked with a really awesome group called Code and Culture that were putting on, and they were activating for Soho Music Month. And off Canterbury Street, we had a whole art walk with guided tours, and a gallery space too as part of it. And then we went over to Miami, and then up to New York, and then we finished off in LA. And by the end of it, I think we had close to 20 something pieces that came in from some really, really interesting creatives from all over, from so many different disciplines, from fine art to just across the board, street art, etc. And so that was the first exercise in really being able to show that these works are, because they were located at a given location, they took on new meanings every time they traveled. And they took on a new narrative for those who were visiting them. And also the fact that any other artwork that's not on the blockchain, can easily be reproducible. So you might see, 10 of something across the world, but you don't really know which one's the right thing. That's like the copy and paste issue. And so kind of thinking like the Chicago bean, where you have one piece that is the thing that's tied to that location, gives it gravity. That was kind of the idea of, if we have this on the chain and there's only one of them, then that piece takes on its gravity and its provenance more so than just kind of like copy paste. So I think that was kind of what was core, is having it be unique and movable.
And we were, as with all of these things, I think when paradigms start to shift, we borrow old analogs. So like art's the logical analog, but I think the stats somewhere is something like probably up to 60% of all art in collections is fake. But the idea that we imbue it with this sacredness or this somehow thing, but part of it is the ability for it to move from place to place and be scarce in this sort of, and it was around the time people were having difficulty understanding the non-fungible in non-fungible tokens. So the idea of moving AR back and forth was hopefully to reiterate the idea about this is a single piece. When you're not in this place, you cannot see it in this place. Despite the fact that we're totally against scarcity in that sense, which is why the layers exist. But it was really interesting work with like onboarding artists that had never played with AR or blockchain, but then some natives, and then obviously some very high up AR people and some music people. It was a really interesting experience to see how that bridged the standard art experience.
Yeah, and it also ushered in a whole nother form of metrics that we didn't even really expect. And I think one of the big things is that because we're talking about activity in the world and engagement with an on-chain experience, it kind of brings in a whole nother different format for actually being able to measure that someone did in fact engage with this thing, or did in fact participate in the storyline. So that was one of the big motivators behind us creating the proof of presence protocol, which is essentially the first of its kind with location coordinates baked into the metadata. And it's an NFT of its own right. And we'll share probably a little bit shortly about Loca NFTs, but essentially it's this idea that when you go to a location, that when you have specific inputs such as time, of course, location, and then also other elements such as weather or the things that are accomplished at that point in time, you can create a dynamic experience that can then be delivered to the individual. And so it's kind of really starting to take basically combining like the dynamics of space and time and all the things that happen in a unique moment that is ours, but then also pairing it with artwork and on-chain assets in games and experiences.
Yeah, I mean, thinking about presence, one, it's nice to say I was there, which is everyone, like from Woodstock to whatever, and people are like, no, you weren't, and then eventually they'll see you. But why does anyone buy a concert tour t-shirt? Because you can buy a cheaper one, whatever, but they want the Grateful Dead 73 one that they were at because that's the thing. And so the idea of being able to deliver something on chain to a place where people are in a temporary space is really appealing, not just from the idea of like this gives a different dimension to merchandise because it's like you can only get it from there or you can only experience that. It allows things like eventually remixing shows, so your photos can then be put on a smart contract and be scrambled around and stuff can happen. And it's also the basis for the beginning of like loyalty schemes or fan clubs, even in the old sense, as well as literally participation. Like you can divide that into the power that people have in the local area to do all sorts. I think bringing locality, bringing time and space into it is what we've been missing for a while from the screens at large, I think.
Yeah, and I think it's also a first time that we're going to have like truly native AR assets that are actually tied to the world because they're also dynamic with the world. So they're built and they're motivated and they breathe because the world is feeding that information in. And I think there's going to be a whole new cast of different generative projects that come out of this. There's going to be a whole new array of fan and merchandise that's going to come out. Fan art and merchandise that's going to come out of this. It's going to be something it's easy to understand for, say, if there's a sporting event and it's one night and it's maybe the finals and going back to the Lakers metaphor, there could be ways to tie in, who's playing, and then you can be able to tie in, potential sponsors, and you can create a unique experience that only lasts for that night for someone to be able to engage with, potentially purchase, potentially activate. So it really opens up a whole nother can of worms of ways that we can use space to engage people through blockchain technology.
Yeah, 100%. I'm curious to know a little bit about what that looks like practically now, right? Because you subtly made a comment about, we can get into the hardware side with AR glasses, and like then that opens up a whole new world of like consistency with this stuff, right? And scalability. But a lot of people's experience with AR is just through their phone, right? Whether that's the really cool Nike hoodies that they did, that whether that's Pokemon Go, whether that's some other form or fashion of that. Snapchat has done things like that too, right? That's basically AR, but without the blockchain. So I'd love to hear a little bit about what the immediate term looks like for how Illust is thinking about this. What are some of these experiences? Tim, you said we tend to take old and make it new with the new tech, and I think that honestly that's the best way to ease people into this before we start breaking things and creating all these new things, right? We gotta hold their hand and baby step them in. So what are the ways that Illust is going and attacking this at the current state of what the world looks like and where the tech limitations are?
Well, it was funny because as soon as we sort of written the contracts for proof of presence, we realized we need some ingredients for this because people aren't going to be able to do it. So Wallet to World came, which is a way of putting any NFT that has the right metadata, which is all of them these days. It wasn't so much then. You can basically throw out an AR piece, put it on the map, people can come and visit it. So anything in your wallet, you can curate a show in physical space that people can interact with. And then we were like, okay, good, people can publish stuff. Then we built something called the GSR, or the Geospatial Registry, which is not quite a chain, but nearly a chain, which takes chain data. So it's a verifiable subgraph that we can verify NFT objects and execute various code based on them. But also it means that we can sort of use it as a reverse oracle and verify other ownership. So someone has a Steam profile or something, we can tie that to an NFT and they know, and then they can use those assets in a slightly more disposable but still ownership verified way. And it allows fun stuff like nesting of NFTs in physical space. So eventually if you have a house, you can, not that squiggles are the most anthropomorphic, but they could live there going around or something.
And talking about kind of this, the LOCA NFT, which is short for location ordered contextually aware NFTs. And that's kind of this dynamic experience that you can have. So one of the concepts too that's being worked. So time, as we spoke about in the beginning, is a core component. It's basically introducing entropy into the system for things that exist in the world. So we're excited to be bringing that into play, as well as some of the elements that Tim was talking about.
What is time? Like, tell me about a little more about that, because I'm not sure I fully understand when you say bringing time into it.
So
yeah.
Do you want to go, Rob? Because you dream time.
No, I think if the question is what is time, I think that's a great question for Tim.
Yeah, I don't know if we have enough time for that.
No, I think time in this sense, we were inspired a bit by early John Cage stuff. So John Cage died ages ago. He's a composer, but there's a piece of his music still being played and hasn't been finished yet, and was never played in his lifetime because his instructions were basically put it in I think it's a monastery or a church, and it's an organ. So the organ's just got a weight on it playing, and then every X amount of time, the score is read by the monks, and they go downstairs and they change the note. And this will finish in 4 years or something. But the idea that you can have this almost pre-coded notion of what's going to happen. And I guess the other thing is, if you look at the frescoes during the Renaissance, some of them look shit now, but they weren't meant to look like they were when they were painted. They were meant to have that patina and that age on them. A lot of artists were it's a 4-year process. So it's not, this is the immediacy of the art. Sometimes art takes time to evolve and do things. So for us, time is a way of adding dynamics or other information sources or contextual stuff, be it, light or even who's looking at it, all those sort of things, into what is ostensibly a immutable experience. And so, there are various ways of doing that, but this way you can have verified layers, subgraph searching, I mean, the examples are things like, if you had a maquette or a model of an architecture thing in AR, and you move it beyond the other hemisphere, it can change based on the notional environmental conditions. And, if you had a cute PFP, it can put a coat on when it gets cold. But yeah, you get into all sorts of interesting stuff, because that is part of the promise of what they were calling persistence with the AR layer, which is this always on, always living digital thing. And now, thanks to like Sydney and other crazy innovations, we're going to see, not living, but perceptibly Turing test passable random avatars, probably selling us shit, but living in that space, And so being able to interact with that as an artist or a creator or just someone who's, interested in living, then that gives us power. It's good, because we can start to basically populate it and, set your apes free, run around, make them wild.
Yeah. What are some of those real life experiences that you anticipate being affected to this, either in the near term or ones that you're most excited about using this technology and replacing or changing the way that we do it now?
Yeah, let's talk about some of the stuff that we have coming up, because that's all integrating all of what we're
Yeah, that's a
talking
good
about. Tim, do you want
near-term answer, actually.
Yeah. Do you want to share more about Max Cooper project that we're working on, and then we can kind of go into Ethember?
Yeah, I'll share a bit. So Max Cooper is a brilliant electronic musician from the UK, probably known most for the videos that seem to be on Adult Swim late at night, because he collaborates on he doesn't just make music. He comes from a science background. Everything he does is about a theory or a concept. So this is exploring, complexification. This one is exploring whatever, and then he works with OG generative artists and some crypto ones now, and some known quantities for us, to make these incredible videos. And then he combines that into his live show, which is, I truly recommend wherever you see it, because it's incredible and frenetic and really good. A good idea. But he has been working with us, bless him, for a really long time. We've been having conversations back and forth with various generative artists and other bits and bobs, and we're working on a project. I don't even know when it's going to drop, but it's going to be soonish, because it's imminent, and it's got a lot of exciting people in it, and obviously Max in it, and it's going to be truly leveraging a lot of the media. But it's basically investigating cryptography, or what the hard MP problems, which is a ridiculous thing to investigate. And he vaguely hopes that visualizing them in this way, someone might solve it, which would win them a Nobel Prize. But that's neither here nor there. So the first one's exploring the RSA encryption algorithm and how that works. And there's going to be some interesting mechanics on geographical interaction, where you pick up what you've interacted with before, all that sort of stuff, which will add a level of change and or rarity. And it's almost certainly going to be across a couple of chains too. So, but that's about all I can say, I think.
Yeah, cool. I think the other element to it is that he also is a touring artist. So some of this can also be related to the fact that he's on the road, going to different places at different times.
I forgot to mention already as part of this. When was that? He played at the Acropolis, sort of birthplace of modern humanity, as we like in Greece. So there is one of these early sculptures there forever, just anchored to that spot. So if you ever go there and you have the technology, you can look at it, and it's a thing. When was that actually, Rob? I forget.
Yeah.
Beginning of last year?
Towards the yeah.
So if you find yourself in Greece, open your phone, go to the map, you can see this this interesting first iteration of the RSA encryption algorithm.
Exactly, and so the thing that's coming up real quick is that we're going to be actually on Friday, February 24th. We're going to be launching the ETH Denver map, the conference map, and so at least for those who come to Illust, it's illust.ar. For those who come to the application, they'll see it's all in the browser. It's through a URL, so you don't need to download an app. That essentially you're going to be presented with a map-like experience. So something familiar to help guide you through maybe potentially unfamiliar territory, which is blockchain or augmented reality. So we started with this map as a basic utility of here's all the conference locations, maybe here's the satellite parties, here's where the murals are, here's great local businesses for food and coffee and meeting locations. But then we kind of added some of the blockchain spice to it, where any location can be virtually checked in with where you can claim proof of presence tokens, which are on-chain proofs that can then be gated for, say, Discord channels or gating content or for ticketing or things of that nature. So people are using these POP tokens as a way to provide access to new experiences and potentially goods and services. But then also all of the points of interest on the map are AR powered as well. So there's going to be a lot of really cool works. One's from Mint Gold Dust. They're doing a culture walk, tackling different areas around the city where they're going to be having it. There's going to be different topics that they're covering in their culture walk from some pretty notable artists. So that's all of this is going to be coming out on Friday, and then we have, I think there's about 9 different like affiliated maps and games that are all tied to this conference map. So it's going to be a map experience like no other. So we're really excited about where that's going to be coming to play in this with this intersection between all of these technologies.
So the idea behind it is I go and I download this, or I go to this URL. I don't have to download an app. So very, very easy, low barrier to entry, familiar. And that gives me access to these like base level experiences that then evolve as I continue to dive into it, as I continue to go to these different places, maybe collect these different POP tokens that give me access and ways to unlock these other experiences, whether that's a map that takes me to this culture walk that I see all of these different AR pieces, or maybe even maps that other people create.
Yep. Exactly.
Yep. And without giving too much away, we're going to be throwing an event, and for those who are in the top percentage of activity and solving some of these, I guess, scavenger hunts that we're going to be baked in, they're going to get access to an exclusive party. So there's going to be some elements there as well. But more details to come. I don't want to give too much away, but we will be announcing on Friday when the map goes live how to participate and be able to gain access. And then the kind of the last component there is that we have this concept called the passport, and the passport is essentially a way to be able to, as we were talking about channels and switching between different worlds, we were thinking of a metaphor that would embody this kind of explorer mindset and going into different districts and different boundaries. And so the passport came to mind as a way to kind of be your tool to navigate across the metaverse outside. And so, yeah, Tim, if you want to dive a little bit more into the passport.
In all honesty, it's a free mint. It's kind of enacting a behavior change, because the idea is that we're hopefully onboarding people. We want them to start thinking in that Web3 fashion. And oddly, for us lot who's sitting there, that's actually harder than we think, because we're like, no, it's obvious. It's connect your wallet. Jesus. But actually they don't. So we thought we'd incorporate this into a tutorial using those analogs. So like a passport made sense. So everybody who comes onto the app from Wednesday, I believe, is when it goes live, will be able to mint it for free. They probably won't even know they're minting it because it's a claim. So the idea is it walks you through how the map works. You find yourself in AR space, you claim your passport. That passport then will act as a token gate for the various other Web3 experiences. So it will immediately make the map more rich. It will allow you to then drop your own pops and leverage them in that way. And all the great stuff that comes along with having, Web3 stuff going on. But yeah, so in a curious way, it's a sort of cheeky onboarding trick. It's like, now you're in Web3. But we're also collaborating with a few interesting people to make some unique visas that will go with the passport, or unique passports that will be dropped and open various other experiences. And they could be anything from like a limited geospatial drop. So if you want to get something, you have to be there. Because we thought it'd be fun to bring back queuing for iPads. No, but it makes it a more sort of exclusive thing. And it will also enable certain studio access and other bits and bobs. So it's also a way to demonstrate token gating without necessarily forcing people to buy an NFT and see how it does. And this is nice because it means we can almost sort of token gate these reality channels now. So it's almost like this is my reality channel, I'm just having it for friends, or this is my reality channel, everyone come in and participate.
Yeah, there's a quick use case that so for example, since it is token gated, a community for if they're going for a conference such as ETH Denver, one of the communities is essentially saying, hey, if you all hold the NFT for our community, you can now see where all of the places where we're staying are at, so that if you want to, because it's also a hackathon during ETH Denver, so it's great for them to be able to just know, hey, this is only private to us, because we are all members of the token, but now I can see where everyone's staying. So if we want to meet up and work on the hackathon or go grab dinner or whatnot, they just have like a basic way to permission access to things that are private.
And works in progress and experiments and such things. And yeah, as Rob hinted, because we're doing standard token gating, any previous NFT collection or PFP collection can do that. So if you hold what's out of fashion these days, I don't know, one of those megabot things, you can have the transformer thing map that everyone would love and go into, and you can just level it the same way as you would with Collabland for Discord or anything, but this is for map layers and AR layers.
That's so exciting. So it sounds like there's a couple action items. You want to summarize before we wrap up here? Exactly. If I'm going to ETH Denver, I know somebody. What do I need to tell them to do?
Hey, Oklahoma under your breath, and then it'll all be revealed.
Yeah. So Wednesday at 5 p.m. Pacific, we're going to be releasing the passports. So be sure to claim a passport, and that's going to give you access to the token gated layers at the ETH Denver map. For those that are going to ETH Denver, they'll also be claiming, we're going to have a limited edition special passport so when they actually claim the passport, it's going to be a cool branded version of the passport that's exclusively for the ETH Denver experience. And then on Friday, we're going to be releasing the ETH Denver map. And so that's going to be revealed along with the gamification elements and some FAQs and all the partners and all that good stuff on Friday. So yeah, that's really the focus. And I guess if you want to keep in touch, Discord's probably the best place for us to connect. That's going to be where we're going to be doing a lot of tutorials and showing people how to actually publish experiences into the world. So because they can create their own maps. Anyone can create their own map if they want to and start building out their map channel. And we have tools ready today to be able to do that.
And I forgot, there's also a sort of call for submissions for people to enter their art or an AR idea or anything along those lines that will then be displayed as part of the official ETH Denver thing. So there's already going to be exhibitions and stuff going around, but if anyone has like a notion of something they want to create, or they've been tapping away at this curious AR experience, drop us a line and we'd love to go through them and see what's what. And I think we can display 7 at these unique places, so that will also add to the experience. Broadly, the theme, if people want a theme, but they don't have to make anything you want, is that the map is not the territory. So things merging between worlds, the sort of breakdown of what we understand as digital, what we understand as physical, what we understand as made up bullshit, and what we understand as actual reality, and how they are becoming less and less, divided. So anything like that would be grand.
Yeah.
So exciting. You guys heard it here first. I'll mark all of these links to Discord, reach out, set your reminders for Wednesday and Friday. There's a lot going on there. Rob, you have anything else to add?
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, we're all in this together, and we all have agency over the way the world looks. So let's start creating.
Yeah, it's time to remember that we do actually generate our own realities. I think we've been in the metaverse forever anyway, since we've learned to think about things from a third person. And so let's bring that back and realize we're the authors of that. And the world can be a delightful, playful, fun, non-scarce place where, shit's better.
Everyone prefers their own perspective. No,
I don't know. I definitely don't. I've got to walk in someone else's shoes, I think, for a long time.
I would definitely be curious to walk in your shoes, Tim.
I'd recommend wearing clean socks, but apart from that, yeah.
Yeah. Thank you guys for hopping on.
Thank you
everyone for listening. This has been so much fun. And Tim and Rob will definitely have to do it again.
Definitely, man. Really, really appreciate it.
Appreciate that, Gabriel.
Thanks for ramble on. I love it.
Yeah.
Of course. We'll talk soon. Thank you, everyone, for listening.
Thanks, guys. Much
Take care.
appreciated. Yeah, keep on
Thank
keeping
you.
on.